Good morning. I have the distinct honor and privilege of giving doctors heartburn. My topic is embezzlement, not a very pleasant topic. There are times that I wish I were a more motivational speaker where my audience could float out on cloud nine. My fear is my audience leaves feeling worse than when they came in, because embezzlement hurts. It's painful. But there is some good news, though, that I'd like to share with you. Over a doctor's 30-year clinical career or plus, 1 out of 3 doctors will not be embezzled. Unfortunately, I believe that means 2 out of 3 will. And unfortunately, there is an emotional component and a financial component to embezzlement. Doctors will be hurt financially, but also their dental teams will be hurt financially because they don't get the raises they deserve. They don't get the bonuses. They don't get their retirement plans funded the way they should. So there's a financial issue here, but for the doctor, it's also emotional. I cannot tell you how many times I call the doctor up to give them the bad news, and the doctor will say something like, "This hurts so much. This person was like a family member to me. I don't know why they would do this. I went to their wedding. They babysat my children." So for the doctor, I've heard it described as a punch in the gut. I've heard it described as bad as a divorce. So a lot of times I'll have to listen to the doctor, get the emotional aspect out first, and then the doctor will usually get around to asking, "Well, how much do you think they stole?" And there's the problem, is people just get tempted to steal, and they don't realize the damage they're going to cause both financially and emotionally. So to illustrate this more, I'd like to take you back to my childhood, long time ago. But my mom used to drag me to the grocery store every Saturday, and I hated it. But one good thing about it, though, is there were a row of gumball machines outside the store. Now, this were back in the 70s in a small southern town when people were more trusting, so usually there were no issues with them being outside. But this one particular day, somebody had busted a hole in the gumball machine about this big, and they had cleaned out most of the gumballs. But because I still had small hands and fingers, I was able to reach in just far enough that I was able to grab 2 gumballs. Now, I don't know if it's because they were the forbidden gumballs or not, but they were the best tasting gumballs I ever had. Until my mom saw what happened. And then I got the tail chewing of my life. And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, "Pat, just because they were there for the taking didn't entitle you to take them because they didn't belong to you." Well, today, our financial teams, they have a gumball machine sitting right in front of them as well. Only they don't have to reach into that machine. The gumballs are literally placed right in the palm of their hands. And of course, the gumballs I'm referring to are payments. Cash, checks, credit cards. It doesn't matter. They could all be embezzled. And now, why does someone embezzle? Most embezzlers in a dental office have actually been working for the doctor for quite a long time. They have a lot of seniority and they're trusted. So what happens? Well, sometimes they have a financial need. Sometimes it's greed. Other times it's anger or revenge. But what happens in the case of the embezzler is they finally make a decision that it's in their best interest to steal from the doctor, even though that doctor may be like a family member. So what do doctors do? The conventional wisdom is you implement processes called internal controls. An internal control is simply a procedure you put in place, and you follow them. We all know some of the common internal controls. Make sure the day sheet matches the bank deposit slip. Make sure for deposit only is stamped on the back of every check. The doctor should take the bank deposit to the bank himself or herself. The doctor should pay their own bills or have a bookkeeper pay the bills. There's a lot of controls out there. So the question is, how many internal controls does it take to prevent somebody from embezzling? Because I've read articles and heard courses where 5 to 10 were mentioned as being sufficient. I read an article by a doctor with an MBA, had over 100 internal controls. That's a lot of internal controls to check, isn't it? So what's the answer? Do we need more on the low end? Is it more in the center or more on the high end in order to prevent embezzlement? The sad answer is none of them. 0. Preventing embezzlement is an oxymoron. They go together like oil and water. And the reason is because the embezzler has made that decision that they're desperate and they have the motivation to steal. And once they make that decision, they're going to steal. Plus, the embezzler can lie awake at night, thinking of different ways to steal. And they also know the internal controls the doctor has in place. So they can sneak around those internal controls. So they are not going to prevent embezzlement. In most cases, I will admit, sometimes an internal control can be in the right place at the right time. Now, that's not to say I'm anti-internal control. I'm very much pro-internal control. They have uses because they can discourage embezzlement in certain particular areas. But the number one thing about internal controls, they are very good at catching innocent mistakes because we all make them and we're not hiding them. And innocent mistakes over time can be more expensive than embezzlement. And that is why I will always recommend internal controls. However, if you want to get a handle on embezzlement and catch it early in the process, notice I said catch it early, not prevent it. What you need to do, believe it or not, is easier than many of you might think. What you do is you look for behavioral clues. At Prosperity Dent, we call them red flag behaviors because it's the behaviors that will give them away. Because you see, there's hundreds of ways to steal from a doctor. But in order to do so with any success, they have to exhibit certain red flag behaviors that they cannot escape from. The most common, your workaholics. It's the employee who never takes vacation unless the office is closed. They volunteer to work in the evenings. They volunteer to work over the weekends. In other words, they're your model employee. They're the ones who say if they do take time off, don't touch my stuff until I get back. I have a system, so I'll handle it. They tend to be territorial and they push the dental team away. Sometimes they'll even create dissension among the dental team. By doing so, guess who's the one person in the office that's not complaining to the doctor? So that's all done by design. There's another red flag behavior to watch out for, doctors. If your employee's Beamer is nicer than your Beamer, you might have a problem. Because living beyond their means, that's another red flag. So if the doctor knows the red flag behaviors to be on the lookout for, now it can be mitigated. So simply by keeping an eye on those behaviors and recognizing them, at that point the doctor can put in some procedural changes that will modify those behaviors. Because the whole idea with internal controls combined with behavior is you want the doctor to be able to catch embezzlement while it's a boo-boo that you can put a Band-Aid around, not an amputation. So that's the key. What we want to do is combine internal controls with behavioral clues. So please, if you remember anything I said today, please remember these two things. Prevent embezzlement is an oxymoron. And it's the behavior, folks. In the end, the behavior will betray the embezzler quicker than anything. Thank you.